Hello, everyone, and welcome to OHSCA Interviews. I'm Vasu Bardwaj, and I'm your host for today's episode. Today, I'm happy to have with me Michael Cooper, the MP for St. Albert, Edmonton, and the Shadow Minister of Democratic Reform. Thank you, Michael, for joining us today. Such an honor to have you on.
Great to be with you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, with the Hill just wrapping up and MPs going back to their constituencies, it's been a very busy time. And going forward, it's going to be a very busy time, especially for the Conservatives in order to kind of preemptively set that strategy up for 2025. And it's great to have you on the show, answer a couple of questions, and we look forward to it.
Look forward to the questions.
So just to start off the interview, I want to ask you, how did you get started into politics?
Politics at a very young age, when I was probably 8 or 10, and eventually my parents said, well, get involved, join a political party. And it's interesting that they did that because they themselves had never been involved in a political party. I don't think it really would have occurred to them that they should join a party, but that was the advice they gave me. Now, they're very political now that I've been elected and they've been involved in all of my campaigns, but back then they weren't. And so I have always been a conservative, and I got involved in the provincial PC party in Alberta at the time, and then the Canadian Alliance, which was a legacy party of the Conservative Party of Canada. And I had been involved in just about every aspect of things in terms of being a riding president, knocking on doors, organizing fundraising events, working on nomination campaigns, and eventually I ended up being elected. So a long time of being involved in the party and movement.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's great to start at a young age, and that's when, time is given in order to form the views and what your personal beliefs are. And it's from starting at that young age, you're able to do what you'll do today. And hopefully other people who want to get started into politics and someday be someone like you also start like you. So I want to hop right into our question and answer segment. And these questions are asked by members of our high school team. So the first one comes from Tippy Tuck, and he's from Windsor West. And he wants to ask you, Albertan MP, what is the best way to protect farmers and workers from Ottawa's agenda? Also, how can we move forward in lifting more Canadians from energy poverty?
The answer to that, and I don't think it's strictly about farmers, it's about everyday Canadians, whatever work that they do. And that is that under this costly government, life has become increasingly less affordable. And it's because of the inflationary policies of this government and the taxation policies of this government. So I think, in short, we need to do two things. We need to get Canada's fiscal house in order. We need to restrain spending that is fueling inflation, that is impacting everyday Canadians and the cost of living crisis that we're facing. And the second thing that we need to do, and a Poilievre government is committed to doing, is one of its top priorities, and that is to abolishing the carbon tax. It's a tax on everything that disproportionately impacts lower and middle income Canadians. It's going to cost everyday families literally thousands of dollars out of their pocketbook every year, and it has no impact with its purported objective, and that is to combat climate change. Under this Liberal government, after 8 years of Justin Trudeau, Canada's GHGs have gone up, not down. They can cite 1 year of COVID. Well, who would want to live through that again? Never again. And so it is nothing more than a tax. So between those two things, getting our fiscal house in order and abolishing the tax on everything, that would be an important start in helping everyday Canadians get by and be able to live without this the costly policies of this government.
It goes back to the conservative ideology of that we shouldn't put a price on carbon, right? We should find technology and invest in greener technology in order to get past the climate crisis. And with that, I do want to ask, where do the Conservatives stand on nuclear energy? Just as a follow-up.
Well, it's an important area, and when we support it, and you're absolutely right. When we talk about reducing GHGs, one of the best ways we can tack the problem is to export clean, ethical Canadian energy, including LNG. And there are lots of opportunities that have been missed by this government in that regard. It's a global problem. Canada emits about 1.5% of global GHGs. And so simply taxing Canadians and punishing our economy and our jobs is not the answer. And we need to leverage the resources that will help combat the reduction of GHGs and at the same time create jobs in Canada.
Yeah, for sure. And with that, I want to move on to the next question. And this comes from Trip in Newmarket, Aurora. And he wants to ask you, as a shadow minister of democratic reform, do you think question period needs to be reformed? If so, how would you go about making or bringing a change in this area?
I think there's a lot of things that could be done. I think the biggest problem with question period in terms of it not being the forum that it should be is lists. The speaker gets a list from all of the parties informing him of which members are going to ask questions. And that creates sort of scripted questions and ministers who get up and more or less predict every day what they're going to be asked. We need to go back to the way it was before television cameras were introduced into the House of Commons, and that is where a member is standing that he or she catches the speaker's eye and be recognized. Now, there is a function for lists. I'm not suggesting that they be abolished altogether, but I think that a good way to shake things up would be if you had half question period devoted to lists where, and they are important in the sense that we might, as an official opposition, have certain questions that we want to ask the government for the day to set the agenda, but also give some breathing room for other members to get up and ask questions on constituency matters or maybe policy issues that are important but haven't received the coverage that they deserve. And I think that would go a long way to shaking things up. There's a lot of other things we could do, but that would be a start.
For sure. Yeah. And if you don't mind me asking, just as a general question, do you know when cameras were introduced to question period?
I believe 1977, but I stand to be correct on that.
All right. I just wanted a rough approximate just for the general knowledge of myself and our viewers. But yeah, for sure. I personally went down to Ottawa a couple of weeks ago and I saw question period. And although it was as if you could grab some popcorn and sit back with all of the snarky remarks, and it was like a televised show. But it's definitely interesting to see. So
well, and I want to say it is, even though you can say it's a bit of a show, it's one of the very few mechanisms that is an opposition party that we have every day to hold the government to account. So it does serve an important function, but it could be improved.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to move on to our next question, and this is asked by Sinyun Wang from Ottawa Venier, and he wants to ask you, as an MP who fought hard in seeking the truth of Chinese interference in Canadian elections, what is being done strategically to compete with the CCP?
From this government, we've seen nothing. We've seen indifference, cover up, an effort to prevent and block getting answers to Beijing's interference. And from the standpoint of a policy response in terms of measures that could be taken by the government, there's been a lot of talk, a lot of so-called consultations, but not a lot of action. no action, in fact. And there are a lot of things that could be done. The obvious first measure that could be taken by this government is to impose a foreign agent registry. This government campaigned against that in the last election. They targeted a sitting member of parliament, Kenny Chu, his Liberal opponent did, in campaigning against that. And we know there was CCP interference in that campaign to spread a lot of misinformation about what that would have provided. But the reason I cite a foreign agent registry is the fact that if you look at the police stations that the CCP has set up, the FBI has been working to shut them down, and they actually have arrested people, unlike in Canada, where no one has been arrested, no one has been charged, no one has been held accountable. And for the basis upon which they have done so is the FARA Act, which has been in place in the United States since the 1930s, a foreign influence or agent registry. And so that would be a starting point. The government has undertaken supposed consultations, but this is years in after they opposed it, and we have no commitment that they're prepared to implement.
So what do you think that speaks to about this government, about their lack of action? Although they speak a lot about it, well, not so much, but what do you think that this says to their actions and their words?
This is a government that is compromised by Beijing. This is a prime minister who idolizes communist China. He called it a perfect dictatorship, essentially, is what he characterized it as being. And this is a government that was, if you can imagine this, it's tough to imagine this, but it happened as recently as 2018. This is a government that was in talks with the Beijing regime about setting up an extradition treaty. And so that is how far this government went. And we have a prime minister who has turned a blind eye because it benefited him politically. That's the bottom line. I mean, none of what we know today is as a result of Justin Trudeau. It's as a result of CSIS officials who become frustrated. It's as a result of good work on the part of credible journalists who have brought this to light. But for that, we wouldn't know anything, and this prime minister would be continuing to do what he has done for so many years, which is to turn a blind eye on Beijing's attack on our democracy. And so what we need, ultimately, is a public inquiry. We need it now. We should have had it months ago, and Parliament has called on it for 3 times for government to initiate one. This government has thumbed their nose at Parliament. And I think the reason for that, quite frankly, is that this government has not taken it seriously, and they are working to cover it up. And they are fearful of what the findings of public inquiry would be. But we need Canadians deserve it, and they need the assurance, 2 things, that we get answers to what happened as far as what the Prime Minister learned of and failed to act upon in the face of Beijing's interference. And the second thing that Canadians deserve is to know that this will not happen again. There will be mechanisms in place, and that we will have a government that actually takes this seriously to stop this attack on our democracy.
Yeah, for sure. And with that, I want to move on to our next question. And this comes from Vincent in Oakville, North Burlington. And he wants to ask you, as an MP who introduced the Canada-Taiwan Relations Framework Act, do the Conservatives plan to, in any shape or form, restore formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan and recognize it as its own country?
That is an issue for Taiwan to sort out as a democracy that it is. But we have a one China policy, and we can debate the merits of it or lack thereof. I tend to be of the view that after 53 years, it's maybe time to revisit the policy. But my bill doesn't do that. It actually falls within the parameters of the one China policy. And it's important to note that when we talk about the one China policy, yet Canada's position is that we take note of Beijing's contention that Taiwan is part of the PRC. That's very different than saying we accept that it's part of the PRC. We merely acknowledge the contention. We merely acknowledge the obvious, that is Beijing's contention. It's a false contention. Taiwan has never been part of the PRC, not for 1 minute. But Taiwan is an important ally of Canada. And it's not just that Taiwan's an important ally of Canada, it's in Canada's interest to strengthen relations with Taiwan. We have strong economic ties. It's our 11th largest trading partner. We have complementary economies. Taiwan offers high-tech products and services that Canadians demand. At the same time, there are significant export opportunities in terms of making Taiwan a key export destination when it comes to clean and ethical Canadian energy, opportunities with respect to enhancing the export of agriculture and agri-food products, as well as opportunities to collaborate with respect to innovation. We have strong people-to-people links, and most importantly, we share common values.
Yeah.
And so, for all of those reasons, the bill that I have put forward is a modest step to recognize Taiwan as it is today, namely a vibrant democracy of nearly 24 million people with a world-leading economy, with a complementary economy to that of Canada, and a friend and ally of Canada. It's time we dealt with Taiwan on that basis.
For sure. And to finish up this interview, we will be moving on to Advice for the Next Generation, where we will be talking about youth involvement and politics and more. So I want to ask you, what should young high school conservatives do in order to get more politically active, and what is one piece of advice you would like to give them?
Well, first of all, I want to compliment you on what you're doing, because this type of engagement is really important. And the bottom line is, my advice would be to do what you've done, and that is to get involved, be active. And if you don't do that, you can't do anything. So that's really bottom line. And that's what I did when I was 14 years old, is I got active. And one thing led to another. And it might mean that at one day you become a member of parliament or an MPP or get elected at the local level. But there's a lot of other ways you can contribute. And it's not all about elected office, but it's part of supporting the movement and being involved in the movement to advance conservative principles. And what I found getting involved at a young age is that the door is wide open. You just have to take advantage of it and show up.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. I personally got involved back in 2021 federal election, and since then, I have not stopped getting involved in politics. It's one of my favorite things to do, and I highly suggest everyone to do it. So with that, thank you so much, Michael, for your time today. We really appreciate you being here with us, and we wish you well in the future.
Well, my pleasure. Great to chat.
Thank you.